Hi, I'm Paula Wilder, and Dr. Hessler has asked me to record this to give you a little bit of advice as you begin your own thesis project. And some experiences that I had that were helpful, I want to share with you. And the very first thing that I would recommend is that you read your project guide. You read it through at least one time, keep it on your desktop, refer to it always, and that keeps you organized, that keeps each chapter formatted as you go along so that you're not spending hours and hours at the end trying to get everything formatted, because that can be overwhelming. And it also helps you because there are examples within the project guide of chapters of your abstract, of your introduction, and dedication pages, all of those. And so after I did my introduction, my proposal, I should say, I went back to the thesis guide and began making the introductory pages because there are 4 to 5 of those, and I went ahead and formatted the table of contents. I drafted an abstract, which helped me throughout the semester to go back and I would make modifications to it. And I would continue to modify the table of contents after each chapter. I did not insert the page numbers until the end so that I didn't have to keep changing those. And in addition, I made a draft outline of each chapter so that I was aware of what I was going to do in each of the chapter, the methodology, the conclusion. Not that it was detailed, because when you start you don't know exactly where you're going, but if you have a roadmap, then that helps you to stay on track and it helps you to know what's coming next. After I submitted each chapter to Dr. Hessler, I began working on the next chapter. I did not take a break. I worked consistently so that I was never behind. And it also helped me because that would enable me to get my chapters to my peer editor so that she would have time to review them, and then I would have time to make the changes and review my chapter again before I submitted it. I also kept in mind throughout the semester that I had a presentation that was going to come at the end, and so I began a draft of that with the advent of each chapter, and so that I was organized with my presentation and that I stayed on track with that, and that was not a surprise at the end. When I finally submitted my final thesis, I began working on my presentation while the final was being reviewed as far as formatting goes. And let's talk about formatting for a few minutes. Make sure that you have the APA guide and that it's worth buying it, because even though you have access to it on the computer, the thesis guide, the APA guide gives you specific information, details that you might not be able to get online as easily. And plus you can keep it right beside of you so that as you make your references, as you go through the semester, as you go through each chapter, you can keep referring back to that so you don't have as many errors at the end when it comes to formatting in regard to APA. And I read it every time I did a chapter before I submitted a chapter. I still made some errors, but it did not take me longer than 45 minutes to make the changes after the format was edited. And so that saved a lot of time in the end when I was preparing for the presentation. I also made sure that when it was time to do the presentation that I practiced it. I am embarrassed to say that I practiced my project in the middle of my living room with my cats as my audience, and they were quite bored with it and fell asleep. But I was able to practice it. I felt confident when I went into my presentation. I was organized, and I probably practiced it 5 to 6 times. You need to plan on, even though I had continued to create my presentation throughout the semester, you need to plan on at least, I'd say, 12 hours of final presentation creation. I spent about 10 hours one day working on my presentation, and then the next day I went back and made some changes. And so I would say that even with all the preliminary work that I did on it, in the end, it took that long to create it. Make sure that you meet the deadlines, that you follow the instructions, that you do your research, and that you make sure that each aspect of the thesis meets the specifications as mandated by the thesis guide. I think if you do this and you meet the deadlines, you stay on track, you take the advice of the peer editor that you have, you take Dr. Hessler's comments and make the revisions immediately, submit that, but in the process always continue to work ahead. I think that you'll find that you're successful and that you will be able to complete your thesis in one semester. Good luck!